Good morning, and thank you for joining us for our program on this beautiful first Lord's Day of the month of October. I hope that you're doing well today, and I would like to extend an invitation to you to join us in our worship services and our Bible study today at Pyburn Street Church of Christ. We will gather for Bible study at 9 o'clock, followed by worship at 9:50. We will also come together again this evening at 6 o'clock for our evening worship, and then we gather on Wednesday evenings also at 6 o'clock for midweek Bible study. We extend a warm welcome to you to come and be our guest at the Pyburn Street Church of Christ. In Hebrews chapter 13, verses 5 and 6, the writer of Hebrews said, "Let your conversation be without covetousness, and be content with such things as ye have. For he hath said, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. So that we may boldly say, The Lord is my helper, and I will not fear what man shall do to me." Friends, for those who pay attention to the news and the things that are going on in the world around us, it's pretty scary out there today in the world in which we live. We're seeing a dramatic increase in hostility toward Christians and Christianity on a worldwide scale. Islam is the fastest growing world religion on the planet, and a couple of years ago it was estimated that 23% of the world's population was Muslim. I'm sure that number is quite a bit higher today. Now, this has a particular significance to Christianity in that Islam is violently opposed to Christianity. Their holy book, the Quran, contains roughly 109 verses that call for Muslims to go to war with those that they deemed non-believers, and that they were to force the practice of the Islamic religion at the point of the sword. Some of these are quite graphic verses that give commands about cutting off heads and fingers and killing infidels wherever they may be hiding. And those Muslims who refuse to join in the fight, they're referred to as hypocrites and warned that Allah will send them to hell if they don't join in the slaughter. Just a couple of those verses from the Quran, chapter 9 and verse 29, it says, "Fight those who believe not in Allah, nor the last day, nor hold that forbidden, which hath been forbidden by Allah and his messenger, nor acknowledge the religion of truth, even if they are the people of the book, until they pay the jizya with willing submission and feel themselves subdued." Now, this reference to people of the book refers to Christians and Jews. And according to this verse, they are to be violently forced into worshiping Allah, violently subjugated into compliance with the laws of Islam. In the Quran, chapter 8 and verse 12, it says, "I will cast terror into the hearts of those who disbelieve. Therefore strike off their heads and strike off every fingertip of them." Friends, the Islam religion is denominated, and some of these denominations stress peace and coexistence with all people. But the Quran itself specifically teaches that unbelievers should be treated brutally and murdered. And there will always be those who are of a violent nature who are going to justify genocide in the name of the teachings which the Quran promotes. And as Islam spreads and becomes more and more influential on the world stage, we have seen a marked increase in terroristic violence by some members of this religion, both here in the United States and abroad. But the question that arises is, what do we as Christians have to fear from this? And what should we do about it? Well, many today have witnessed the moral decay of our own society here in the United States. God has been completely expelled from our public schools. Prayer in school was made illegal on June the 26th, 1962. The entertainment industry pumps sex and immodesty into our homes 24/7, 365. Most of our media outlets condemn any public display of faith in God, but they praise the public display of sin. Acts of violence are on the rise in our nation. Our law enforcement officers are being criticized and condemned for doing their jobs, and God is being systematically removed from every facet of our government and from the public eye. Now, it is obvious to any of us who have faith in God that the moral decline and the rising level of violence in our society is linked with the lack of God's influence. When God was kicked out of our society, His principles of morality and honesty, integrity, personal accountability, respect for authority, and love for one another all went with Him. A godless society will inevitably be ruled by godless principles. There will be no morality, no integrity, no honesty, no personal accountability, no respect for authority, and no love for one another. And without these guiding principles, there is no outcome possible other than self-destruction. And friends, our society is self-destructing all around us. And those of us who see it and recognize it for what it is seem to be caught up in the middle of it with no way to stop it. One way of illustrating it would be a grasshopper riding on the front of a passenger train heading toward disaster, and the passengers shoveling more coal onto the fire to make the train run faster into destruction. Well, the solution is so obvious to the grasshopper, but everyone is so busy shoveling coal on the fire that they can't or won't see this coming train wreck. Friends, we have some big problems in the world today. We all know this, unless we live with our heads in the sand and know nothing about world events. There are some things going on that, quite frankly, are pretty scary. And given the direction that things are heading, what will this world look like in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years or more? Our country today is a free society governed by elected officials, but it is being infiltrated by people of different cultures and values. And what is going to happen in the future when enough of these people are living in our free society that they can elect officials who will change our laws to theirs? More specifically, what's going to happen to our way of life and our culture when our country is being presided over those who align themselves with a faith that is taught that they must force people into the worship of their God, and they must force people into living their lives according to their customs. What is it going to be like living as a Christian in a society that is hostile and violent to Christianity? Well, friends, we don't have to ask that question. All we have to do is watch the news, because it's happening in other parts of the world, and it is coming here. So what do we as Christians have to fear from this, and what should we do about it? Well, we have two questions to answer. The title of our lesson today is To Fear Not. When someone that I'm working with comes to me with a problem, I often tell them that identifying a problem without offering a solution is whining. It's wanting someone else to give us a solution. So we're going to have to look at the problem that is before us, and then we're going to have to look at what God says to do about it. But the first question that we're going to answer is, what do we as Christians have to fear from this? Well, in 64 AD, under the reign of Nero, there was a devastating fire in the city of Rome that burned a large portion of the city. In a political move to transfer the blame for this fire to someone else, Nero blamed Christians for it. And here is a direct quote from the historian Tacitus, who, by the way, was not a Christian. Tacitus, who was born in 56 AD, was a young boy living in Rome during the persecutions, so that makes him a contemporary eyewitness to the events that he wrote about. And Tacitus wrote, "Therefore, to stop the rumor that he had set Rome on fire, He, referring to Nero, falsely charged with guilt and punished with the most fearful tortures the persons commonly called Christians, who were generally hated for their enormities. Christ, the founder of that name, was put to death as a criminal by Pontius Pilate, procurator of Judea, in the reign of Tiberius, but the pernicious superstition, repressed for a time, broke out yet again, not only through Judea, where the mischief originated, but through the city of Rome also, whither all things horrible and disgraceful flow from all quarters, as to a common receptacle, and where they are encouraged. Accordingly, first, those were arrested who confessed they were Christians. Next, on their information, a vast multitude were convicted, not so much on the charge of burning the city, as of hating the human race. And then Tacitus went on to say, in their very deaths, they were made the subject of sport. For they were covered with the hides of wild beasts, and worried to death by dogs, or nailed to crosses, or set fire to. And when the day waned, they were burned to serve for the evening lights. Nero offered his own garden players for the spectacle, and exhibited a circus type of game, indiscriminately mingling with the common people in the dress of a charioteer, or else standing in his chariot, taking pride over what was going on. Friends, Nero reigned from 54 AD to 68 AD, and under the reign of Nero, Peter and Paul were both put to death, and Christianity became illegal in the Roman Empire. What we fear is coming to our way of life, and our service to God in heaven was already happening to the Christians in Rome. And this is especially significant to us today, in that how they were instructed to deal with their fear of the things happening to them is exactly how we should deal with our fear today. Rome was not the only enemy that Christians had at the time either. The Jews were intent on destroying Christians. Paul gives us a picture of what they were enduring in the first few years of Christianity in 2 Corinthians 4, verses 8 through 11, where he says, "We are troubled on every side, yet not distressed. We are perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not forsaken. Cast down, but not destroyed. Always bearing about in the body the dying of the Lord Jesus, that the life also of Jesus might be made manifest in our body. For we which live are always delivered unto death for Jesus' sake, that the life also of Jesus might be made manifest in our mortal flesh." Friends, Christians had it very rough in the first century. The Jews who rejected Christ were trying to kill them, and now the Roman government declared it illegal to even be a Christian. Things were really looking grim for Christians, and it was under these kinds of circumstances that they were instructed on how to deal with fear. Some of those instructions, Peter, who was killed for being a Christian, wrote in 1 Peter 5, verses 6 and 7, "Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time, casting all your care upon him, for he careth for you." Paul, who was also killed for being a Christian, wrote in Philippians 1, verses 28 and 29, "And in nothing terrified by your adversaries, which is to them an evident token of perdition, but to you of salvation, and that of God. For unto you it is given in the behalf of Christ, not only to believe on him, but also to suffer for his sake." And then again in Philippians 4 and verse 6, "Be careful or anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God." All of this is a reflection of what Jesus himself said to the severely persecuted church in Smyrna in Revelation 2 and verse 10. "Fear none of those things which thou shalt suffer. Behold, the devil shall cast some of you into prison, that ye may be tried, and ye shall have tribulation 10 days. Be thou faithful unto death, and I will give thee a crown of life." Friends, we want to thank you for joining us for our program today. We pray that you will consider these things that we've discussed and that you will join us again tomorrow as we continue looking at this thought of fearing not. Friends, we hope that you have a wonderful Lord's Day.